Welcome, my brothers and sisters from Padre Pio Prayer Group. Today, I invite you in my place. Actually, it is still a forbidden place, but I made an exception um, because Lucy and
Harry.
Lucy and Terry are here to record me, and I need to be recorded ahead of time because on October 2nd, I will be recovering from a surgery made the day before. No surgery, but it's relatively without risk, so don't worry about it. I just trust the doctor who will be doing it. He's an amazing doctor. And then, so I had to record the message. And Lucy got this idea that it could be done here. It saved me a trip to Vancouver, but also it's nice. So it's a way of inviting you to my place today. So um, let's start. It's about the meaning of suffering in our lives. Often we 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 let we lose the value of our suffering. It remains empty, meaningless, useless, and so we want God to teach us how to suffering in a way that is fruitful, and that's what He did on the cross. So let us look for that. I want to start with how Viktor Frankl. He was a Catholic in Auschwitz because he was Jewish, and he wrote a book on suffering, and he developed psychotherapy called logotherapy. But his book is Man's Search for Meaning, and it came about when he was prisoner in Auschwitz, the worst place in the world, basically, during World War II. And he noticed that those who try to sell their soul in order to save their body did not survive, end up losing both. They didn't have the drive to go through the pain. And so, they would try to save for a little bit of food to, to denounce their brothers and sister Jews who were trying to escape or whatever. And this one did not survive. Actually, the prisoner, when they would be initiated to the place by the SS, they were told this: from now on, the only way to survive is to think only about you. Forget your family, your children, your parents. If don't think about them, only you. And that was an advice that they got from Hitler, who got it from the occult. Hitler was using some occultism to find his guidance, and I'm sure that this reflects the devil's doing it. Just think about you. Don't think about others, even your close family. That's the way to disaster, actually. Those who follow that advice, they perish. They could not have the drive to go through. But those who just did the opposite, did so they were like, those are the prisoners who they when they would see somebody very sick or thirsty, they would give their little piece of food to them so that they may live. So they didn't think of themselves at all, but they got the drive to survive and to live. And of course, Viktor Frankl had a very meaningful after that. He lived a long life and a deep, deep Christian. He was a wonderful therapist. So, what does suffering do for us, and how we can live with it? The suffering could lead us to atheism, and that's what the devil wants. You see, there is no God. He doesn't really care for you. So just drop that and just live for yourself, just get the maximum pleasure, power, possession you can accumulate, and that's the way to happiness. So, but Jesus showed us another way to live and to die, to give his life. It's the way of unselfishness. Actually, one of the saying of Christ that Paul quote, but is not in the gospel, but he quoted in I think his letter to the Corinthians is he said Christ said there is more joy in giving than in receiving. So that's the key to the advice in how to deal with suffering. I was pleased when I was in St. Mary's. Actually, the first person I heard the confession was a person very much in pain physically, with all kinds of diseases, but she had a great faith, and she was practically blind, almost completely blind, I think, and then she had glaucoma, all kinds of diabetes, and all kinds of stuff. And at the end of the confession, she said, "What a wonderful God we have." I was so amazed at that. And then the last time I saw her, well, not the next to last, is when it was I think the Holy Thursday celebration. She was there in a wheelchair, just in front of the pulpit where I preach. Remarkable, listening with so much intensity. And I said, the way we die is the way it's very important we give our spiritual inheritance by dying in peace. And I gave the example of my father. So then the next day, she going to the Good Friday, she stumbled down the stairs of the second floor, outside stairs, with her wheelchair, and then that would be the end of her in about 3 weeks. She got multiple surgery, and then when I visited her a few days before she died, she could not speak or talk hardly, but she wrote down. Even her husband could not understand what she was saying. She just wrote, "Your father," meaning that after all these surgeries, she remembered the homily, and now she was doing for us what my father did. She was living with great intensity this moment. We were just stunned by that, like amazingly. So she gave a meaning to her suffering and even to her death. She did it. She wanted to give the witness of what faith can do in her life, and she really, I will never forget those words that she said. So it's just kind of an introduction. What suffering can do for us is concretely it deepen our journey toward God and accelerate it, not in the sense it will shorten our lives, but it will bring us closer to the goal sooner. And then when we are closer, when we become what God wants us to be, we have a very fruitful life. So basically, when we suffer, we have to surrender to God. We have to say, okay, this is not what I want, but I trust that this is your will for me, that it's for my good and the good of the people I love. So little by little, as St. Paul said, we are led to patient endurance, and patient endurance bring us to perfection in ourselves. So that surrendering when it is hard, when it is not easy, we learn to surrender until we have that total surrender. Well, that's basically the same thing. total surrender to the Lord is like, it's not, before that it was partial surrender. I surrendered the pain of this, say my my nose problem or whatever it is. I surrendered that, and little by little, as God bless this surrendering, I can go deeper into the surrendering. Little by little, we surrender for little things, and then we see that it gets us closer to God, or God kinds of move in our life and change things for us. Like He allowed the doctor to come and have the surgery on October 1st. It was supposed to be maybe in a year, and just the day that I surrendered about this, Lord, I cannot stand it. 1 year like that, one more year, do something. I just cannot stand it. And the next day, I received that phone call from the doctor's office. Are you willing to have it on October 1st, just in 2 weeks? Oh yes, tomorrow, and if you want to, anytime. So I felt that God had, He knew I could not handle it, so He gave me a break. But the kind of suffering lead you to become a new person. This is something I experienced here, because not long after I came here, May 1st, 2020, okay, at first it was exciting, all those trails I did, and I was in perfect health. And then after 2 or 3 months, well, came the fall with the darkness and all that, and the cold. And then I was almost depressed, and it was so hard. And I got this problem with the sinus, and everything got worse. I could not sleep. So I cried to God, but then He teach me to surrender through all these things. So what is the, well, um, what is the meaning of the suffering? How can we? Saint Paul said in Colossians 1, verse 24, I complete in my flesh what is lacking in the suffering of Christ. All the hardship. What is lacking in the suffering of Christ? He gave everything. He is the plenitude of salvation. But He is the head of the body, the church, the mystical body. He is the head. The head is perfect. But we are the members, and we have to become like the head. So we need to enter into the suffering of Christ to be like Him. But remember, it leads to resurrection. Eh? So the members of Christ, they have to complete what the head. So the members complete what the head has done for them. And that is, I think, one of the meanings. So the Protestant first understood this, I complete in my flesh. It is the work we have to do to proclaim the Lord. It's true, like St. Paul mentioned, all this suffering. 2 times he almost perished in a shipwreck. He spent one night trying to stay afloat, and then land on an island, and there he was bitten by a viper as he was trying to make a fire to get one. And he was stoned, and he pretended to be dead, and then the disciple prayed over him, and he walked away. And then he walked away back to the city where he would be stoned again, but he ended escaping in a basket from the wall and anything. But he was unstoppable. Persecution, stoning, flogging. He had been flogged many, many times until finally he was martyred. So the work you do to bring the gospel to the people, and this is valid also for lay people who practice in evangelization. They are complete in their flesh what is lacking to bring the gospel. That's a good way to understand it, but The Catholic tradition and John Paul II in his encyclical on suffering said there is more to it. Uh, Even the suffering that's not directly related to the proclamation of the gospel can be joined in that. For example, my stupid nose, and this is bothering me at night especially, and sometimes I would get very impatient, like almost swearing, and then I would be so much lack of sleep that I would drop everything, and I still do drop things because my mind is not completely working completely well. So all this taught me to become patient and patient endurance. And this is not a joke. When I started having this pain, even before I started, somebody got a message for me. Uh, it's during the night. She was. It says somebody pushed her. So and she looked at her husband. He was sound asleep. So and then she heard the voice. In your voice, partly. Pray for Father Pierre. He will need it. He will need it a lot, not of patience. And actually, I can witness that it was true. It became true just a few days after she had this prophecy. I started to be very impatient, but understood when she told me this. I understood that God knows about my suffering, and He wants me to become more patient in accepting His will. He is doing His work here, teaching me to surrender. And that was quite amazing for me, that experience. So, and I don't want you to suffer, but I think we cannot go without it. Um, so, how do we offer our suffering? Actually, is simply by joining our suffering to those of Christ and to those who are suffering in the world. Like, I would pray for all those who suffer with those sinus or sleepless night. Or we join it because we are part of the body of Christ. So all that happened to one person is for the benefit of all the others. So I pray for those who I connect to by because they have a similar suffering than I do. So that's really one way. I give you an example to as a woman from St. Mary's. She had tried to stop smoking many times and she could not. And then she got the news that her dad had lung cancer and that it was he really need to stop smoking. So she found a reason to stop smoking. She said, "Dad, we will stop smoking together." And they both made it. They both stopped. Uh, the dad, the dad died of cancer, but he did what he could, and I think she prayed for her that he stopped smoking, but also for her salvation. So she offered this to the Lord. It's good to offer our pain to somebody we know we love. It can be family members, people, for me, people of my parish, and people of the Archdiocese. I pray, I offer my suffering for them. Not that I'm seeking more suffering, but I'm seeking that we be very fruitful. Um, Lastly, there is one question that I want to address with you is the question of why the suffering. Why did God created us so weak that we are sinful, that we it's almost inevitable that we fall into sin? Why God made the journey to Him so it seems so difficult, like renouncing all those pain and it's not easy. Um, Before original sin, we had Adam and Eve had an easy intimacy with God, no fear of God, and they did not need to suffer. But then they rebelled, And the coming back to intimacy with God implies suffering. Um, just being cut off from God make us very weak to fight the difficulties of the world. So why the answer to that why did He created us perfect? One answer we could, but it's not a complete answer. See, well, the angels were created perfect. They are not in a transition toward perfection, and yet they sin. Well, we think that if 1/3 of all the angels maybe followed Lucifer in their rebellion, 1/3, well, it comes from the revelation. It's symbolic, but we don't know. It said 1/3 of the angel, 1/3 of the stars in heaven fell on earth, and the stars were associated with angels. Anyway, so even if they were created perfect, they had the possibility to sin. But the real answer is this. Um, we are created in the image of God, the Trinity, and God constantly gives and constantly receives. He has the joy of giving and the joy of receiving. But actually, according to St. Paul, he said, Christ said, there is more joy in giving than in receiving. Well, uh, only in this life we have the opportunity to give something to God, to accept suffering, to accept the hardship, only in this life. When we die, we cannot give anything to God. We cannot increase our merit, we just receive. We are so much taken up by the flow of God's life, a very deep flow. It's like a wave that carries us in joy and thanksgiving, but we cannot give anything. Therefore, we are not totally like God anymore. We cannot give. And the saint knew that, and they tried to give as much as possible. They didn't pray for a short life, but for a long life, and they wanted to work hard till the end. They asked Saint John Vianney, who was sleeping only 2 hours a night, if you knew you would live to be 100 years old, would you still continue? He said, yes, even if I would to live until the end of time. He said, but because it's such a great joy to serve a great God. So the desire to bring something to God and not being able would be a limitation in our happiness, in a sense, in heaven. And God give us this life, and it's difficult. He used the sin and the rebellion and all this to so that it's not easy to overcome. We have to give to God constantly, uh, and that can be a leitmotif of your life in suffering and in joy. I do it for God, serving the others, bearing with trial. Saint Paul said that those trials are like gold. They prepare. They are nothing compared to the weight of glory that's awaiting us. See? And Jesus, God said, Matthew 6, whatever you do, it can be fasting, almsgiving, prayer, do it in secret, and my Father in heaven will remember. So eternally, God will remember what we have done for Him. And in heaven, He will remind us of all that He has done for us. He has done so much, and we are done what we have done for Him. He will remind us. God is the most grateful person. He said, "Any of you who give a cup of water to a disciple, because he is a disciple, will get happiness and hundredfold eternal life." So when we offer up our sacrifice for the sake of the sons and daughters of God, for the sake of the kingdom, God will remember that, and He will remind us in heaven. Do you remember you did that for me? You did that for me. Matthew 25. Whatever you did it for me. So it will constantly rejoice us. Yes, you have given me a lot, and I'm grateful for it. So I think it's a beautiful message when I go through something hard, whatever it's physically, emotionally, spiritually. I'm telling myself, God will remember that, and it will make my joy when I will be in heaven. Not only the joy of receiving, but the joy of giving will be made present by the memory of God. When God remembers something for us, we are in God, we kind of becomes our memory. It becomes ourself. So that's about what I wanted to share today. Um, I think it brings peace and joy and strength. It doesn't prevent you to enjoy life, to celebrate life. On the contrary, um, it makes you more sensitive to the joys of this life, even uh, physical, material, but emotional and spiritual. But it enhances the whole of our life. The light and the darkness at the same time become brighter. So let us be grateful to God for for all this. And I think that's it for my talk. If there is some question, I would be happy to answer them. Thank you. Oh, was